Hi, welcome to Dean Park. The focus of this video really is to look at an updated piece of rolling stock that I've got, as well as look at a new Accurascale product that fits inside my PTA tippler wagons. I'll also be able to show you the product running on the layout, as well as give you a very brief insight into what I've been doing here on the layout in the last few weeks, with a kind of full update coming near the end of the month. Accurascale announced some wagon loads for some of their products at the tail end of 2020, and one of the loads was for the PTA tippler wagon that you see in front of you now. After doing a bit of research into what loads they carried in the Scottish region, I narrowed it down to the iron ore loads that you see in front of you now. There is 5 in a pack, and they're just coming in at under £17 per pack. I've got 10 tippler wagons, so I needed 10 loads. So I've got 2 packs here, so I'm going to take them out the packaging and see how they fare and how they fit into the wagon. First impressions out the box are positive. It's made up of a kind of resin, I think, and it's got this polystyrene block fitted to the bottom, obviously to lift it up into the wagon. If you wanted to make the wagon have less of a load in it, I'm sure you could take that off and have it sitting lower in the wagon. This resin part here has had kind of sand or a grit applied to it, and then it's been given the iron ore covering. You can probably see some of the edge of the sand there along the edge of the casting. Very realistic colour. I like how it's got different tones in it, and obviously with the sand lying different ways on the actual moulding, it gives a very realistic appearance. It's not too uniformed, and you know, it's got ups and downs and bumps to simulate the real thing, which I think it does fairly well. Putting the product in the wagon is really easy. It's made easier by the fact that they've taken small square corners out of the load so that it can navigate around the detail on the wagon. So you just line it up and lower it in. As simple as that. Once inside the wagon, it's a nice snug fit. There's no obvious gaps along the length of the wagon or at the ends. Obviously these wagons are far too clean just now, and they will be receiving a weathering in time, and that is really when the loads will make a big difference. Having just taken the load out and obviously considered the depth of the spacer here, the foam spacer, and I said earlier you might want to take that off to have the wagon load sitting a little bit lower in the actual wagon. However, you might have to adjust the actual resin mould to be able to do that, because Accurascale have been very clever in obviously using this spacer, because if you look at the end profile of the wagon, there is a slight draft angle taper to it. So they've obviously thought about that when they've used the foam spacer so that it sits at the right height into the wagon. So if you do wish it to sit lower, you might have to take a file to the edge of the resin, put a slight chamfer on it for it to sink a bit lower. But then of course removing it might then become an issue if it's too snugly fitted. Before we get them running on the layout, just a quick tip: don't throw this packaging out. Accurascale packaging is always pretty well designed and engineered. If you want to take the loads out of your wagons, you can slot them back in there, and this sleeve will go snugly over the top, and the foam bits will hold them in place so they don't get damaged. It's better that than taking them out, leaving them lying in the loft, knocking them, chipping them, and generally making a mess of them. So I would recommend, if you want to then take the loads out, you use this packaging in the future. Well, that's them fully loaded and on the track, so let's back up a loco with suitable muscle to pull this heavy load. The Humble Type 2 has been in quite high demand recently thanks to Helian's new 25. I've not got any 25s in the layout just now, however what I have got is a few 26s and 27s. The one in front of you here is a Class 27, it's number 27033. This was a purchase back in spring 2020. However, it spent most of its time away from the layout and the last few weeks down at Alex Carpenter of ABC Workshops, who's been given a bespoke weathering for me based on photographs that I sent him of the Class 27 in service in and around Scotland. Let's have a look and see what Alex has done for me. Looking at the side profile, straight off we've got very grimy and dirty lower section of the bogies, batteries, fuel tanks, and he's used a varying tone of, I would say, sleeper grime, frame dirt, that kind of stuff to get really into these bogies detail and really make them pop. He's also got different tones of grease and oil spillings around about the springs, the fuel tanks, battery boxes, etc. You might be able to pick out on the camera, if not I'll change the angle. He's put dry brushed some silver onto the steps there to give the impression that obviously they're worn because that's where the driver will step up, probably with steel toe cap boots on. Looking at the body side onto the roof, we've got some streaking coming from the roof down the body sides, and we've got a general build up of caked on muck along the lower side of the body. We've got the exhaust smuts around the exhaust port here and a general toning down of the BR blue. This is quite a dark BR blue. My other Class 27 is a slightly lighter blue, as is my Class 26 in the same livery. But it really suits the model, and Helian have done a fantastic job of applying this livery. Looking at the number 1 end here, prior to sending it down to Alex, I'd already fitted all the pipe work, buffer beam detail and the ploughs. I asked Alex to give me a grimy kind of finish on the lower area, showing him some pictures of how the snow ploughs were weathered. Obviously they get very dirty down that end of the loco, but also they've been kind of wiped clean with even the pipe work brushing against it and the coupler brushing against the central part of the plough would just take the dirt off and reveal some yellow, so he's really captured that superbly well. What I really like is the grime along the lower end and lower edge of the nose there on the yellow. It's been not just applied with an airbrush, he's done some of his wizardry there to give it an accumulation of dirt that's been streaked and washed down the nose. He's also got spatters to show where the flies would hit off the nose and accumulate. We all get the flies on the front of our car in the summertime on the bumper and the headlights. Locomotives are no different, and he's captured that with some very subtle spattering weathering. He's also done some light wiper marks on the windshields and just generally toned down the bright yellow. Quickly turning to the number 2 end, again he's brought out the weathering with the streaking down the face of the loco, the accumulations along the bottom of the yellow edge of the nose there and the cab. Again, buffer beam has been weathered, but the detail has not been fitted, because obviously if you have buffer beam detail fitted at the number 2 end, it'll foul the coupler. I really am chuffed to bits with what Alex has managed to do with this Class 27. It's exactly what I wanted, exactly like the photographs that I sent him. Alex is not one to rush the work. He'll take time and build up the layers of weathering and use different techniques. It's not just airbrush, there's dry brushing, there's wiping off and then reapplying with an airbrush. So there's all different techniques that he uses, which he won't indulge me with too much of the detail, unfortunately, but he really does get a good level, realistic finish on his locos. I certainly trust him with the stuff that I've sent him, and so far he's given me superb results. Just a quick look at something I've been doing this last few weeks, and that is adding the tarmac to the Linoleum factory section. As you can see, I've got a dirty footprint there of where the building will go. That's using some weathering powders to enable the building to appear to be part of the scene and not just plonked on top of some tarmac. I'll go into how I made that whole tarmac section up in the next update. Something you may have noticed as the trains were going round is that I've installed 3 new head spans at the signal and telecommunications area to the start of the depot. I'll cover this in more detail in my next full update.